Hi, my name is Jim Morris, and I wrote a book called Gaslights and Dog Whistles, Standing Up to Facts Over Fiction in a Fearful and Divided World. This is the third video I've done on different parts of the book that might be of interest to people who are potential readers. And in this part, I want to talk about one of the things in the book that I talk about, which is this idea of conformity theory. And, it sounds all fancy and stuff, but really when I was writing the book, I was thinking, how do we talk about the fact that there are people who just have an alternative reality? They're seeing the world differently than the world actually is, at least in our opinions. What's going on there? What's the psychological phenomenon that's occurring that makes that happen? An example of that, there's lots of examples, but one example in current times, of course, is, well, the two examples that come to mind is when when President Trump was inaugurated, he claimed that there were more people at his inauguration than had ever been at anyone's inauguration. And of course, we actually have data about that. We have the reports and the head counts from the National Park Service, and we have aerial shots of the National Mall during the inauguration. And it's just not factually accurate, but he stuck by it and sticks by it to this day. So what's going on where he thinks that? And actually, he was able to get other people to start thinking that and to dispute the facts and dispute the data and say that's just not true. Of course, the other example is the 2020 election, which he calls the big lie, where there has been absolutely no evidence whatsoever, nothing but positive proof that the election was fair and the result was fair. But still, he and others, his followers, continue to say, it was a big lie and that he won the election. So I'm not getting into a debate about whether or not he did or not. I'm just saying, when those kind of things happen, when people's realities are so different, what's behind that? Well, a psychologist named Solomon Asch did a study of this. And Solomon grew up in Poland in the 1920s and actually moved to the United States with his family to flee from what they could see was a growingly hostile political environment for people that were Jewish. But he ended up being a psychologist, and in the 1950s, he came up with this theory called conformity theory, which talked about social pressure and how social pressures influence our ability to make decisions. So the test, all I'll talk about is the test, because the test itself is kind of interesting. So we did a test, and he had 3 lines that were different sizes: a small, medium, and large line. And then he had another picture of just one line, and so it was kind of set aside. And he was going to run a series of tests where test subjects would come in and pick the longest line. All they had to do was point at which line was longest. Now, the trick was he was doing it with groups of people so he could notice social pressure. So there might be 4 people in the room. 3 of them had been pre-briefed to not pick the longest or the shortest line, but to pick the line in the middle. In other words, they were briefed to pick something other than the line they knew was the right line. Right? The 4th test subject, who's the only real test subject, had to make their own decision, given the fact that there was going to be this social pressure of other people who saw the world differently. And sure enough, when he tested people individually, they almost always picked the accurate line. But as soon as other test subjects other people were entered into the experiment, the people that had been briefed, when they said which line's the longest line, the people who'd been briefed would pick the shortest or the middle line, and which left the person that hadn't been briefed to go, well, boy, their reality is different than mine. I see this other line as being the right, but if they feel that way, they must be right. So I'll pick the line that they picked. Now, the study showed over and over again that people are influenced by that. So instead of the test subject actually picking the factually accurate line, about 50 to 70% of the time, they would pick the line that the other members of the group picked as the right answer. So they would suspend their own version of reality to go along with what the group thought. Now think about the implications of that for the world that we're seeing right now. Somebody wants to fit in, somebody wants to belong, somebody wants to be part of a group. There is peer pressure. We all know about that from having been teenagers. So does peer pressure play a role in people suspending what they know to be true to support something because that's what other people who they like and respect maybe are doing? I don't know, but it's curious. So I hope you pick up the book. and learn more about conformity theory and the other topics we talk about. Thanks for listening.